Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zeng here, and today I am bringing you a introduction to Moon series in VGC 2019. The Moon series, of course, is the second part of VGC 2019 in the set of rotating rule sets, and we are starting that on January 8th, and it'll go all the way up until April 1st. For those that may be unfamiliar, this year VGC has a list of rotating rule sets, and each one is a slight modification from the previous one. So the Moon series adds a couple of things from Sun series, and then the last series, which is Ultra series, will be kind of a combination of everything. So I wanted to make this video really to, first of all, get myself acclimated with Moon series, but also help you guys who either may have not played Moon series or even followed VGC at all this year get acclimated with the format. There are a ton of important resources linked in the description below that I'm going to be referencing, so please use those and think about it as an addition to this video. There have been so many great content creators both on YouTube and on just online in general that have really made some great content out there that should really help you increase your knowledge of VGC in general, but specifically for Moon series as well. So please refer to those as I talk about them, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please show support by leaving a like and sharing it with anyone else that may be interested. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to first just quickly go over the rules because I know some people sometimes stumble back on this channel and don't even realize what VGC 2019 is at all, but there are timestamps in the description below, so if you want to skip ahead, please feel free to do so. I'm going to go over some early impressions of the format and talk about Z moves and Z move users that are currently common. I'm going to review a online tournament that was held by ZELDA and had a lot of top level players and teams used. And finally, I'm going to give you guys some sample cores and teams from Sun series to adapt from. Once again, the links in the description below will really guide you to a lot of helpful resources that will have stuff like specific EV spreads and Pokemon that you can potentially try out. This video won't fully dive into that, but you know, because I have the links in the description below, you should really be able to add all of it up to give you guys a pretty good starting point. So, for the rules, if you haven't watched VGC in the last year or so, in 2019 we are back to GS Cup rules, which means you're allowed up to 2 restricted Pokemon. So, if you watched VGC 2016 or 2010, once again, you can use these Pokemon like Kyogre, Rayquaza, and whatnot. Double Battle still brings 6 Choose 4. The key thing here that's still in effect is that Mega Stones, Red and Blue Orb, and Dragon Ascent are all banned, and so those are going to really substantially change the format. Currently, we don't have any of those for the Moon series. The only new addition is that Z Crystals are now allowed, except for the Ultra Necrozma Z move. So, not the, biggest of changes. The next series, Ultra series, is really going to be a drastic change, I think, from Moon and Sun, but in Moon, we just have Z Crystals. That being said, of course, it's still a slightly different format from Sun series, and if you're confused on what Pokemon to use Z moves on, I'll give you a brief summary of what people currently are using. But first of all, just some early impressions. Like I mentioned, I think early meta Moon doesn't really seem to be that different from Sun. If anything, though, I think Lunala is going to be one of the most consistent Z-move users, and we've seen a lot of top-level players move towards Lunala just because it's a great Z-move user and an excellent Pokemon with a great ability. I think we're going to see more non-restricted Z-move Pokemon as the metagame develops. Pokemon that really fit a very specific role that can use Z-moves. Because in Sun series, we actually saw that even without Z-moves. For example, at the Latin America International Championships, we saw World Champion Paul Ruiz use a Moltres. We saw Melvin Keg use a Volcarona and a Torracat. So there are a lot of really good non-restricted Pokemon that no one else has really explored but can fit very well into specific team compositions. I think with Z-moves, it just allows for that a little bit more. I also think there's going to be more exploration of the niche restricted Pokemon. I think Palkia is an excellent example of this. We barely saw Palkia in Sun series, but people actually like to use a little bit more, especially in early Moon series because of Z-moves. And in general, this isn't a surprise, but most people prefer offensive Z-moves. In a format like this, that's still very offensive and centered around these big, beefy legendaries, I'm not too surprised to see that being the case, but as the metagame develops, I wouldn't be surprised to see more things like Z Tailwind, Z Trick Room, Z Psych Up, even Z Geomancy if people really want to go there. So definitely a lot of potential with Z moves, but if you're wondering what's popular early on, here are a couple of Pokemon. So, I've listed a couple of Pokemon that I think are, and I split it into 2 categories, the more common ones and the interesting ones. If you want to try out specific sets with Z moves and you don't know how to build these Pokemon at all, check out the Trainer Tower article linked in the description below. That one is going to really help you because they have sample sets for so many of these Pokemon that I've listed here. The most common ones are definitely Lunala, Kyogre, and Groudon. I think Lunala is one of the Pokemon where if I see it in Moon Series, a lot of the times I do expect it to have a Z move. I would say more than 50%, but obviously it's still early metagame. And all of this is early metagame, so what we see now might be drastically different from what we see in 2 months, but this is just to give you guys an idea of what to expect currently. Kyogre and Groudon are really interesting because they're both very, very great users of the Z move, and we see it very often on them. That being said, they both have so many different great items, like, you can't just expect the Z move on it. Choice Scarf Kyogre is still a very strong option, as is Choice Specs, or even something like Mystic Water or Berry. Similarly with Groudon, we've seen, Choice Band, we've seen Bulky Berry as well. And so these are Pokemon that now do have the option of Z moves, but I feel like Lunala is one that really likes using it because it's not like it has an item that's super, super crucial to it beforehand. Now, with Kyogre and Groudon, though, it just gives it another tool within its arsenal. So you should still expect to see a lot of Scarf Kyogres, a lot of Berry Groudons, a lot of Band Groudons, for example. But the Z moves just really increase another thing that it can do within its toolbox. I mentioned that Palkia earlier. Palkia is really interesting. Pretty much, will always run the Waterium Z alongside Kyogre. You really can nuke things with it, and you don't have to rely on the risky Hydro Pump for your first attack, which can be a big deal. The Steel type Solgaleo and Necrozma are pretty interesting. I think, Solgaleo obviously gets access to a really strong Steel move, but also fighting, so you can one-shot Incineroars. And Necrozma, you get a bunch of options. You can run, the offensive Z moves, but also something like Z Trick Room. So some potential there. And with Necrozma, having the Z move means that you can't get knocked off, which can definitely help you out a little bit and increase its survivability. The bottom row are some more interesting options. I don't really expect to see too many of them, but I think there's some potential. There's Z Lugia. There's a set of that also in the Trainer Tire article. Z Rayquaza with Fly, the Flying Z move, which I've linked the video in the description below, which covers a potential set that you can run for Z Rayquaza, and Z Evoltal, and which could be interesting because, with so many Lunalas, a really strong Dark Z move could potentially one-shot the Lunalas. That being said, I think like Evoltal is a Pokemon that's probably still going to run Assault Vest or Black Glasses a lot of the times over the Z move, but at least there's like a reason to potentially use the Z move on it. Rayquaza Lugia, we didn't really see any of in Sun Series, but at least with Z moves, maybe there's more potential in Moon Series. Of course, I've not listed many Pokemon on this. Xerneas, Mewtwo, Reshiram are just a couple of examples that are viable with Z moves, but are ones that are definitely a little bit more niche. Xerneas is a great example because why use a Z move on Xerneas when Power Herb already is such a good item? You can commit a Z move to something else that's substantially stronger. But these are just a couple of things to know. I think Lunala easily the most common one, but Lunala, Kyogre, and Groudon I see a lot of use of, and then some occasional usage in the other ones. The bottom row, I haven't really seen people use it yet, but I think it definitely has more potential than maybe some of the others. In terms of non-restricted Pokemon, this slide really should not surprise you at all, because they're all some of the most dominant Pokemon from the Sun series. I think I do see a little bit more on Tapu Koko and Tornadus. Venusaur is one that I've seen a little bit of as well, and I think makes a lot of sense because of the items that it would use previously. Koko, I think, is the most common one I've seen by far, but Tornadus with the Z move fits very easily onto the team comps with Xerneas and Kyogre, and with the Z move you can one-shot Amoonguses, whereas before you could not guarantee that. Other examples of ones that maybe aren't as common but are strong are, Kartana. Kartana's an interesting one because, yes, it can be really strong with the Z move. You can run, Fight Z move, Steel Z move, Grass Z move, Z Tailwind. So a lot of options there, but then the thing is like you can just get outsped and one-shot by a lot of different things like Tornadus, like Choice Scarf Kyogre, like a Xerneas, that's Geomanseed. So with Kartana, if you want to run the Z move, like you need to have a good reason because Assault Vest or Sash are still great items that just allow it to stay around for a little bit longer, and that's really important in a format where, Kartana hits really hard, but also can get one shot. So, people have been saying, okay, Z Kartana. I've watched a bunch of replays. I don't think people have really trended towards that, though, because I think Sash and Assault Vest are still really good items. And I think Tapu Lele and Incineroar kind of suffer from the same syndrome, where Tapu Lele still really likes the Choice Scarf, still really likes something like Focus Sash, but Z move with Psychic, of course, does do a lot of damage to things like Kyogre, Groudon, Xerneas. Incineroar is a really interesting one because people are, think, oh, Incendium Z, Dark Z in general, just hits for really, really hard. It can one-shot Lunala, but then the thing is that Berry is just so good on Incineroar. It means that you stick around substantially longer. As soon as you get rid of that bulk on Incineroar, it is so much easier to take care of it because 2 hits will potentially just get rid of it. So these are all options that you definitely work on, especially on the right team, but people still seem to typically go for the non-Z move variants. Finally, Ludicolo, an interesting one we didn't see too much of in Sun Series after the beginning, but definitely strong with Walterium Z next to Kyogre. And then Gengar and Landorus are pretty interesting options, where we didn't really see these guys used too much in Sun Series. Some people had some success with it, but not, wasn't one of those non-restricted Pokemon that everyone was using. Gengar gets access to Shadow Z move, and so of course you can use Z Destiny Bomb, but also Z Sludge Bomb. And then Landorus can use the Tectonic Rage and make it a little bit stronger. We've seen some Swords Dance variants as well. Obviously, a bunch of other Pokemon I did not list on here are like Talonflame and Stakataka, which have viability as well, but these are just some of the more common ones that you should expect to see earlier on in this format. One thing I also want to go over is the ZELDA Challenge, which was an online tournament which had around 65 players or so, and had a lot of the world's best players really in it. It's the only real tournament that we've had under Moon Series so far, and I think the results are pretty interesting to analyze. Another really cool thing about this tournament is that it was on Showdown, so if you actually want to watch any of the replays from Finals, Top 4, or Top 8, go to Showdown Replays, which is linked in the description below, and plug any of these guys into it. You can watch their games against their respective opponents. A couple of interesting things to note here. One, the winner, Jono TV, actually had Necrozma Duskmane on his team, which is not something we've seen very much of, even in Sun Series. And, you're thinking, okay, Z move, sure, maybe it gets better with the Z move, but the Necrozma or the Kyogre actually didn't have the Z move. Kyogre was still Choice Scarf, Necrozma, I believe, had a Citrus Berry, and then it was actually Ludicolo, which had a Z move. Also interesting to note is that Jono actually didn't bring the Ludicolo into any of his games in Top 8, Top 4, or Finals. That being said, I think there's a good reason for that. It just, with the team compositions that he was going up against, it didn't make very much sense. So, I think it's interesting, and it goes to show that you don't necessarily need a Z move to win your games. Obviously, it's very nice to have a Z move user, but the fact that Jono, basically played at a handicap throughout the top cut and was still able to win is a testament to how his team can counter some of the other common team archetypes. Rounding out the top 4, we had Ashton Cox, who's still using the team that him and Jeremy built early metagame in Sun Series and really revolutionized that metagame. So Lunala, of course, such a good Z move user. You do see the Z Crystal on it. Desu, another great player from Europe, also running the Lunala with the Z move. And finally, I think one of the other top teams you're going to have to watch out for going into this next series is the Groudon bulky Evoltal team. I think these teams typically will run the Assault Vest on Evoltal, potentially Swords Dance, Berry, or Z move on the Groudon, and then the Tapu Koko running the Z move. In the previous version, it was Choice Specs. This was the team that we saw 2 players specifically that I can think of, Oliver Escalin and Rogov, used to great success, and it did win the Anaheim Regional Championships under Rogov's belt in late Sun Series. Rounding out the top 8, we had a bunch of interesting things. Pato running a Groudon Xerneas team. I think Groudon Xerneas is definitely something that I maybe expect to see a little bit more of now, especially with the Z move. And then a lot of Lunala teams, so Kyogre and Xerneas once again being the most common partners. I think the 2 interesting things to note here is that Ninetales is something that's actually trending in usage because of Japanese players. I actually haven't really seen what it does exactly, so if you do know, maybe you can comment in the description below. But something that a bunch of Japanese players have been running, it's been increasing in popularity, and obviously can take advantage of the sun when Groudon's using it. And then Jamie Boy, aka Mr. Jellylegs, running a Pheromosa and a Charjabug on his team, which was really, really interesting. So, good. I think the results here are not too crazy, but there are a couple of cool things to note. 1, a Necrozma winning. 2, a Ludicolo with the Z move being on the winning team. 3, so many people using Lunala. And 4, there's obviously some room for creativity, with the Ninetales, with a Charjabug, with a Pheromosa. You don't have to stick with the common team compositions, but, for the first tournament in Moon Series, one that wasn't even sanctioned and one that was just online, casual, and had some prize money, but nothing too much on the line, I don't think it's too crazy to see people just adapt Sun Series teams. That being said, I don't think you should extrapolate too much information from this tournament because, once again, there really wasn't too much on the line and people just wanted to play Moon Series and, no one really built super seriously for this tournament, so it's not a surprise to see Sun Series teams just adapted for Moon. And I think as we progress with this metagame, we'll see teams centered around maybe Z moves a little bit more and team archetypes that are a little bit different from the ones that we saw in Sun. That being said, if you are confused and you don't really know where to start, here are a couple of great team compositions that had really great success throughout the course of Sun Series. One thing that's really interesting to note is that the Xerneas Kyogre team that was dominating like so many different tournaments has actually decreased in popularity a little bit, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, Kyogre can run the Z move on that team. It either likes like Choice Scarf or Mystic Water or even Berry sometimes. But the thing is, with Z move you get one really powerful hit, but then the rest of your damage output is reduced, and then you're also not like boosted by a Choice Scarf in terms of speed. So you can run the Z move on something like Tornadus, which I think is probably the best Z move user on the team, but it doesn't exactly do the most damage, especially against like non-restricteds. And so that team has actually decreased in popularity a little bit from what I've seen, but it's still really, really good. Ashton's team still as strong as ever, and Ashton and Jeremy, both of their teams I should say, still very, very strong. Of course, I talked about this Groudon Evoltal team, which is really centered around this Assault Vest Evoltal, kind of chipping away with damage using Snarls and using multiple Xerneas counters to really beat out Xerneas. Groudon Xerneas, still really strong, and I think we're going to see people explore that a little bit more once again in this format. And then a couple of other team comps to round out some of other teams that I liked from Sun Series. I think, obviously, these aren't all the teams that did well in Sun Series, but I wanted to use ones that had common legendary cores that you could try from. There are tons of other examples linked in the links in the description below. I'm going to refer to... Look at the just results, basically, from Trainer Tower and from Victory Road. You can see what people were using. And if you want to see more, like, crazy combinations of restricted Pokemon, definitely check out those links. You just want to go to tournament results from different regionals and special events over in Europe and in Asia and Latin America, and of course North America. But and one slight note, Justin Kruball's team there does have two Tapu Leles. Obviously it did not have two Tapu Leles, there was a Toxicroak as well. And I believe in terms of these, Riley's team and Alfredo's team and Justin's team are actually, you can like see the pace bin for it. So I'll try to link those in the description below as well. Other teams you can kind of finesse and figure your way around. I mentioned some things about it, but yeah, these are some of the best teams from Sun Series, and if you want to just play Moon and adapt a good team from Sun Series, try out one of these. If you want to try out different cores, obviously a lot of this comes from that previous slide, but here are common cores and partners that are currently used with. Nothing too surprising or crazy really going on here. Ninetales apparently is being used a lot with Xerneas Lunala, so that's something that's interesting, and it's something I'm going to look into more myself. But overall, Xerneas is still really strong in this format. Evoltal is something that was obviously very good in the beginning of the format as an offensive option. Now towards the end of the format, it's being used more of a defensive option with Snarl and Assault Vest and Oblivion right wing. But it's something that definitely is very good. No surprise to see Pokemon like Incineroar, Kartana, Tapu Koko dominate, and Amoonguss really dominate in terms of non-restricted Pokemon. But I hope you don't look at this slide and just think, oh man, like I need to use these Pokemon. What's important to note is that these are just common partners, and oftentimes we see players use really interesting picks like the Talonflame that you see with Groudon Xerneas, or like the Moltres that we saw from Paul Ruiz's team, or Torracat or Volcarona, just to name a couple of examples. You can most certainly use good non-restricted Pokemon that other players haven't used. These are just common ones if you want a starting ground, and these are things that you should expect to see most of. I can't really stress that enough. So, some other things to note before we really finish off this video. Key thing, like, don't be afraid to try out what's standard if you have no idea where to start. If you're really, really lost and you're like, oh man, I don't know how to approach this format at all, just try out some of the teams that succeeded in Sun Series and edit it a little bit. It'll at least give you a starting point. I think one thing that can be really tough about competitive Pokemon when you're starting out is you need to be able to have a good team and play well. You need to learn about both of those too, right? So it's tough to learn about playing well if your team limits you considerably. And as a result, you're stuck thinking, oh, maybe I'm just really bad at this game, but sometimes the reality is that your team just isn't up to par, and so you're at a major disadvantage from the start. So don't be afraid to try out what some of the top players are using. That being said, don't be afraid to push the boundaries as well. I think a lot of people look at VGC and they're like, wow, like everyone's using the same stuff. Why don't I just use the same stuff but play better than them? It's clear that you can find niche Pokemon that are very, very good, and often the best players in the world are able to win because not only are they great players, but they're also able to find ways to make their team one level above everyone else's, and that often includes finding these niche Pokemon that fit perfectly onto their team. You look at the history of VGC, right? Pachirisu on Sejong Park's team, Hitmontop and Raichu on Wolfglick's team. These are Pokemon that weren't that common in those respective formats, but were perfect for the teams that they had. So don't be afraid to push the boundaries, but also, like, if you have no idea where to start, just try out what's common. It's okay. Like, you are just trying to learn, right? And that's a great way to learn. Some other common things to know. Z Palkio I think is really interesting. I've seen a fair amount of that. It's decently popular, common with Kyogre. Once again, fast, hard hitting. Don't have to rely on that Hydro Pump immediately. I also think you really shouldn't underestimate the Steel legendaries, Necrozma, Duskmane, Solgaleo, Dialga. A lot of potential between those guys, especially because Xerneas is as strong as ever. The next 2 points, very, very, common sense after the couple of slides, but the top legendary threats you see there, Lunala, Groudon, Kyogre, Xerneas, and Yveltal. A lot of teams will have a combination of 2 of those 5. And then the non-restricted Pokemon, the most common ones that you're going to see are Kartana, Incineroar, Venusaur, Stack Attack, Tapu Koko, Amoonguss. Just to name a couple, of course, there's Tapu Lele, Tapu Fini, as well as a bunch of different others. So I can't stress this enough. There's a ton of room for creativity in Moon Series as there was in Sun Series. And I think, like, if you just want proof of how cool teams can be built, look at how, look at Worlds 2016, for example, and look how the teams ended up being from that top 8. They were very, very different from the teams that were dominating early format. That being said, anytime you're in the beginning of a format, people are going to trend towards things that are more common and things that are easier to play around fundamentally. So this video was meant to really just give you an overview of everything and help you have a better understanding of Moon Series, but there is a ton of other stuff out there. If you want resources, I've linked, once again, all of them in the description below. Victory Road and Trainer Tower always have tournament results, and so you can see what team compositions are doing really well. You can see which players are doing really well. They both also have a really great resource of Sun Series teams to try from, which include EV spreads and pace spins and even QR codes. So if, you're really, really lost and you're like, oh man, where do I start? Just take one of those teams and maybe throw a Z move onto one of the Pokemon just to get started. Trainer Tower also published a really great article that has spreads, as I mentioned, of the Z move legendaries and how you can play them, and the non-legendaries actually. So if you want sample sets, take a Sun Series team, throw on the combination from Trainer Tower's article about Z moves, and combine those together. Very, very helpful. I believe they are actually going to be putting out an article soon on sample teams, and by the time this video goes up, it might not be up yet. If it is, I'll link in the description below, but just bookmark Trainer Tower, because if you want sample teams to actually pull from, I cannot recommend that resource enough. Other places, VGC stats, Picolytics, Pokemon Global Link, which isn't going to be helpful right now, but will be when Battle Spot actually updates, and then Showdown Replays. Showdown Replays is honestly fun. You can just look at top players and teams and see what's common on the higher ladder, and shouldn't be used too seriously as a resource, but I still find very helpful. So, if you want to watch Moon Series, here are a couple of events to keep your eyes out for. Dallas Regionals is going to be the first one. It's going to be in just 2 weeks. And then the Oceania International Championships in mid-February. That one's going to be exciting because it's in the earlier half of the metagame, but there are going to be so many good players going to it as well. So it's going to be interesting because I think that event really is going to, kind of set the metagame and set the pace for the next couple of major events afterwards. So I'm excited to be watching that. I think that should be a really, really fun one to spectate, and there are going to be so many good players attending that tournament. Anyway, guys, that's it for this article, for this report. I do want to thank Absurdity VGC specifically. I meant to include his name on the slide earlier, but he gave me some really great insight into the format overall, as well as a bunch of other players on Twitter. Once again, keep your eyes out check out the resources in the description below, because they've already published great content regarding Moon Series, and they're only going to publish more content as the format develops. I wanted to make this video for 2 main purposes. 1, to guide you to those resources, and 2, for you to have some good fundamental understanding of Moon Series before it actually starts. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you to all the content creators who've been putting out great content. Please go check those out, because this video very much is in combination with all those great people and creators. And thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Road to Ranked will be out very, very soon, as the Moon Series rules will be updating soon, and I'll see you guys then. All right, peace.